So business connectivity services, the main purpose of it is allows us to expose line of business data through SharePoint. And it's been around for a while. It's actually started out in SharePoint 2007. Back then it was called the Business Data Catalog, or BDC. And then in SharePoint 2010 it changed to BCS. And actually in BDC, the only thing you were allowed to do was just read only. You could only read data. You couldn't do writes. And then in 2010 you could do read-write. And now it's been expanded. So before you could read-write and data from just from databases. And then in 2010 you could do read-write data from databases and WCF web services. But now the big improvement in 2013 is it's really smart about OData services. Which makes sense because a lot of things, with the REST API in SharePoint and how you can use OData against the REST API, it makes sense that BCS would be able to consume OData web services, REST web services that use OData. And you can still, consume data from .NET assemblies. Of course, they have to implement the right interfaces. So you could build custom .NET assemblies that would expose your line of business data. That's possible. However, I highly don't recommend doing that because pretty much you should be able to connect to almost everything you want to using just the out-of-the-box features. But I mean, the great thing is that if anybody exposes their data using web services, there's a really good chance you'll be able to consume those. And if it's a database, it's really pretty easy. So, but if not, you could build your own connectors. And so really what it boils down to is that it makes it really easy to expose external data in SharePoint. Like I was saying before, it is descended from the Business Data Catalog. It's just a lot more. It still has the core concepts of the Business Data Catalog with the way the XML model file is used to expose the external data sources. But there's just a lot more services piled on top of it now. That's why it's called Business Connectivity Services. It is part of SharePoint Foundation and also Server, obviously. So BCS, what it does, again, it exposes line of business data. Well, it does it using a special kind of content type, an external content type. And then once you have that external content type, then you can create a list from that. And so you can get it into that format that SharePoint loves. SharePoint loves lists. So pretty much everything in SharePoint is a list. Okay, even document libraries. Document library is just another glorified list. And once you have data in a list in SharePoint, SharePoint knows about lists, and it has all types of web parts that deal with lists. And all of a sudden, the client-side object model, there's an API that goes against lists. And so you can go, that same object model, you can go against your external lists. And so everything works really nicely in SharePoint when it's a list. And an external list is a first-class citizen as well here. It's considered to be just a regular list as far as most of those features go. We can also use the line of business data as lookups in standard lists and libraries. So we can actually create like an external column and then use that in a list to do lookups of data. And that's great. We can actually expose our line of business data to no code and programmatic workflows. So just how you might, workflows can consume lists, well, this is just another list. So those workflows can consume this type of list also. And we can also, with regular lists, we can create custom menu and ribbon actions for items. We can do that. We can also include our line of business data in search results. We can have the search engine crawl our data if you're using SharePoint Server. And then also you can create custom pages and info path forms to work with the line of business data. So when you create your external list in SharePoint Designer, there's an option to use. You can have it create info path forms, and then you can edit those forms. So quite a lot of functionality. So some of the concepts: we have an external content type, and we have an external list. And these items are also known as external entities. And so BCS also supports declaration of the relationships between these entities by defining associations. and then you could use those associations with business data web parts. So you can create pages that have parent-child relationships. An action is a declared menu element that provides the ability to connect items in an external list or lookup to additional functionality via a URL. So you could create an action that opens a page in another site that uses the data in an item. So, for example, you go to a URL and you want to pass in, maybe you have like an external list of products, and so you can create an action for that, but you want to pass in your product ID to that URL. Well, it supports that type of functionality, just like with regular, the actions that you see on a custom action on a list. Same type of functionality. So again, custom actions are for regular list items, and then we use the actions for the for BCS, so we can get that functionality where we can open pages in different sites and get at that data that's in the item. We can also create profile pages. So what this means is that when, let's say for example, you have your line of business data that's been exposed to search, and the search engine is crawling it, and somebody does a search and your line of business data items show up in the results. Well, if you have a profile page defined, it can actually display that line of business data item using the profile page to make it look better in the search results. And there's also security and connection management. So there's the business data connectivity service application, and that controls the permissions for the application definition use and the management. So it controls the application definition, so the definition of your external data source, and allows you to manage the permissions. So you can say who's allowed to change the permissions, but then also, this is something important that can be used in conjunction with BDC service application, is the secure store service. So secure store service, that's actually a descendant from single sign-on, which was back in SharePoint 2003, where the whole purpose or the pattern is you want to store a set of credentials so that each user, every time they access an external data source, doesn't have to authenticate. So you basically have like some type of a service account, and you store that service account in a secure store, and you encrypt it, and then you map it to users or groups. So if you have an Active Directory group mapped to a set of credentials, if the user comes in and is part of that Active Directory group, then they'll be able to connect to that target application using those credentials that were mapped in the secure store. And this is available in the server version only. And again, it stores those credentials for external access and allows you to map users and groups to those credentials. And then it gives you the claim tokens based on the associated credentials. So that way you don't have to, it's not going to keep authenticating every time. You get a token, and so when you make the next request, that token is there and you're able to authenticate. I'm going to go ahead and do a demo now, just looking at the secure store service. Okay, I have Central Administration open up right now, and I'm going to go to Manage Service Applications, and I'm going to go to the Secure Store Service. And right now there's no target applications in the Secure Store Service application. And you see this key management here. I already have a key, but you can, if you need to have a key in here, basically it'll create a key for you if you enter in a password, a passphrase, creates a key, and that's used to encrypt all the credentials that you store in the secure store. So I've already done that. So I'm going to create a new target application. I'm going to call it Northwind. We're going to be connecting to the Northwind database, which I have a copy of that locally here. And this is going to be a group. Okay, so target application type, it could be individual if you want it to be, or group. I'm choosing group. I'm going to click next. And this is a little confusing, this page right here. Basically, what this is saying is what field types do you want for the username and password, or for the credentials for the target application. And so I'm going to use Windows username and Windows password because I'm going to use those Windows credentials. I'm going to connect to my Northwind database using Windows credentials, and so I'm going to pass those in. But you could have something like a PIN, right? Or you could have a certificate and a certificate password, or you could have a PIN and a key. In this case, I don't need that, so I'm going to take the defaults. And then this is just how it shows up. You can change the field name. So I'm just going to leave it. I don't need to change that. And now we have to specify who the target application administrators are. So basically, who can manage these things? Well, in this case, I'm just going to put my account there. I'm the administrator, so I'm going to put my account there, and then the users and groups that are mapped to the credentials defined for this target application. Well, these are all the people who are actually allowed to access the target application. So in this case, I'm going to use all authenticated users just because I'm going to expose read-only data, and it's not. I don't care who sees it, so I'm just going to say authenticated users. I'll save that. So what that means is that if you authenticate to the SharePoint website, then you're going to be able to have access. It's going to map your credentials to whatever credentials are set to connect to Northwind. Now we haven't set the credentials yet for Northwind, so we need to do that. So we're going to check Northwind, our target application. Now we need to set the credentials. So you can see here all users, and I have my names here. So I'm going to use my account, and I'll put in the password. So these credentials are going to actually get saved and get encrypted. Okay, so we've just created that. We've created target application in our secure store service. We'll use this later on to connect to Northwind. We'll use this nice, basically single sign-on functionality.